Ever feel like your work projects are more like escape rooms, where no one has the clue book, deadlines looming, meetings multiplying, and you're pretty sure half the team thinks you're building a time machine when it's really just project management software? Well, today's deep dive is for you. We're jumping headfirst into the world of Scrum with the ultimate guidebook, the Scrum Guide, written by the very people who brought Scrum to life. We'll cut through the jargon and give you the need-to-know info so you can walk the walk and talk the talk.
And maybe even lead the sprint, right? What's really interesting about the Scrum Guide is that it's not some rigid set of rules carved in stone. It's more like a flexible framework that helps teams and even entire companies navigate the choppy waters of complex projects.
Okay, so less follow the recipe and more like, here's a map and a compass, find your own way.
Precisely. The Scrum Guide really highlights that Scrum is about adapting to the unexpected. It recognizes that with complex projects, you don't always know all the answers at the beginning. Think of it like this. Imagine you're building a house. With traditional project management, you'd spend months planning every detail before even hammering the first nail. But with Scrum, you build in stages, get feedback along the way, and adapt your approach based on what you learn. So you might realize you need a bigger window in the living room, or decide to add a deck halfway through. That's the beauty of Scrum. It allows you to embrace change and deliver a better final product.
So no cutting corners, but definitely open to course correction along the way.
Exactly. And the Scrum Guide is clear about this. You can't just cherry pick parts of Scrum. It's a whole package deal. Every element serves a purpose. The guide uses the term empiricism, which sounds fancy, but it basically means making decisions based on what you observe and experience, not just assumptions.
That makes sense, especially in fast-paced environments. Relying on guesswork when you're building a product is like trying to bake a cake with only half the ingredients.
And speaking of ingredients, the Scrum Guide highlights three essential ingredients for Scrum to work: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Think of them as the pillars that hold the whole framework together.
These aren't just buzzwords then.
Not at all. Transparency is about making everything visible. Imagine a team where everyone understands the project's goals, the progress being made, and any roadblocks encountered. That's transparency in action.
So no more siloed information or surprise last-minute issues popping up?
Ideally, no. Transparency enables the next pillar, inspection. This is where the team regularly examines the work, the product, and even their own processes to see what's working and what needs tweaking.
Kind of like regular health checkups, but for your project, and then adaptation comes in to make those necessary adjustments based on what you've learned.
You've got it. The beauty of Scrum is this built-in feedback loop. It encourages teams to constantly learn and adapt, ensuring that they stay on track and deliver the maximum value possible.
So it's not just about blindly following a plan, but being smart enough to deviate when necessary.
Yeah.
This reminds me of something else mentioned in the guide, those core values. Commitment, focus, openness, respect, and courage. It seems like these aren't just nice to haves, but crucial for this whole system to work.
Absolutely. Imagine trying to embrace change and adapt on the fly without a foundation of trust and respect. It wouldn't work. These values are the bedrock of high-performing Scrum teams.
It's interesting how these values aren't just about the work itself, but about how people interact and treat each other.
And that's what makes Scrum so powerful. It understands that successful products are built by successful teams. Speaking of teams, let's talk about the heart of Scrum, the Scrum team.
Okay, so this is where the magic happens. Give me the rundown.
The Scrum team is a small, self-managing group, usually 10 people or less. And here's the key. They have all the skills necessary to turn an idea into a working product.
Wait, so they don't need to constantly run to some higher up for every little decision.
That's the beauty of it. Scrum empowers the people closest to the work to make the calls. Of course, they still collaborate with stakeholders and have clear objectives, but they have the autonomy to determine the how.
Okay, I'm starting to see why people are so passionate about this. It's like giving ownership back to the team.
Exactly. And while the team is busy making things happen, you have the product owner who's laser focused on maximizing the product's value. They're the voice of the customer, understanding their needs and ensuring the team is always working on the most important things.
They sound like a conductor, making sure everyone's playing the right notes at the right time to create a beautiful symphony of a product.
What a fantastic analogy. The product owner keeps the why of the product front and center. And to guide the how of it all, you have the Scrum Master.
Ah yes, the Scrum Master. The guide was clear that they're not some tyrannical project manager, right?
Not at all. Think of the Scrum Master more like a coach, mentor, and guardian of the Scrum process, all rolled into one. They remove obstacles, protect the team from distractions, and empower them to be their best.
So not dictating from on high, but clearing the path and letting the team shine. That's refreshing.
Exactly. And the Scrum Guide makes it clear that this coaching style is crucial for building a high-performing team. It emphasizes that the Scrum Master serves the team, helping them embrace the Scrum framework and maximize its effectiveness.
Okay, so we have our empowered team, our product guru, and our coach. What's next?
Well, to keep things moving, the Scrum Guide outlines specific Scrum events. Think of these like the heartbeat of how work actually gets done. They create a rhythm for the team, ensuring they're constantly inspecting, adapting, and moving the product forward.
All right, so we've got our all-star team, our product vision, and a coach to keep everyone moving in the right direction. But how do we actually structure the work itself? Enter the Scrum events. What are those exactly?
Think of Scrum events as the checkpoints on your project's map. They bring structure to the chaos, ensuring the team stays aligned, makes progress, and continuously improves. The Scrum Guide is very specific about these events. They're not just suggestions, they're essential parts of the Scrum framework.
So we just sprinkle them into our project plan like confetti and hope for the best?
Not quite. Each event has a specific purpose and time frame. They fit together like puzzle pieces to create a flow of work, and they all revolve around the sprint.
Okay, the sprint. This is where the rubber meets the road,
Okay.
right?
Exactly. The sprint is the heart of Scrum. It's a fixed period, usually a month or less, where the team focuses on delivering a usable piece of the product. Think of it like a mini project within the larger project, and guess what? The Scrum Guide is crystal clear. Once you set a sprint length, you stick to it no matter what.
No last-minute scrambling to cram in more features.
Nope. That's the beauty of it. It forces the team to prioritize and work within constraints, just like in the real world with real deadlines.
And those Scrum events we talked about, they happen within this sprint time frame.
Exactly. They're like the gears that keep the sprint moving smoothly. It all starts with sprint planning. This is where the team gets together and figures out what they can realistically achieve within the sprint. They'll choose items from the product backlog, that master to-do list we talked about, that align with the sprint goal.
So it's like a team huddle before a big game, setting the strategy, making sure everyone's on the same page.
I like that analogy. It's all about collaboration and alignment. The team decides together what they're building and how they'll build it. They create their own game plan, which we call the sprint backlog.
So no micromanaging from the sidelines.
Not in Scrum, the team owns the how. But to keep things on track, we have the daily Scrum.
This is where I imagine everyone standing around a whiteboard, coffee in hand, giving those dreaded status updates.
Well, not quite. The daily Scrum is designed to be quick and to the point, no longer than 15 minutes. It's a chance for the developers to sync up, share progress, and identify any roadblocks. And here's a little secret. The daily Scrum isn't about reporting to the Scrum Master or product owner. It's about the developers holding each other accountable.
I could see how that fosters a sense of ownership and teamwork.
Absolutely. It's about creating a rhythm of communication and collaboration. And then at the end of the sprint, we have the sprint review.
Time to show off what they've accomplished.
Exactly. It's a chance for the team to demonstrate the working product increment they've created during the sprint and get feedback from stakeholders.
So less of a formal presentation and more of a collaborative showcase.
Exactly. It's about transparency and getting valuable input to make sure they're on the right track. And after the celebration of a successful sprint review, we have the sprint retrospective.
Okay, so this is where we break out the confetti and party hats, right?
Well, it can be celebratory, but it's more about reflection and continuous improvement. The team gathers to discuss what went well during the sprint, what could have gone better, and what they can change for the next sprint.
So it's like a lessons learned meeting, but with a focus on action.
You got it. The sprint retrospective is about fostering a culture of continuous learning and improvement. The team identifies actionable steps they can take to be even more effective in the future.
It sounds like the Scrum Guide is really big on this whole continuous improvement thing.
Absolutely. Remember those pillars we talked about, transparency, inspection, and adaptation? Well, the sprint retrospective embodies all three. It's about creating an open and safe space for the team to inspect their processes, learn from their experiences, and adapt their approach for the next sprint.
And speaking of those pillars, you mentioned something earlier about empiricism being a core principle of Scrum. How does that tie into the events?
That's a great question. Empiricism is about making decisions based on observation and experimentation, not just assumptions or gut feelings. And the Scrum events provide a framework for putting empiricism into action.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
Let's say your Scrum team is building a mobile app and you're using Scrum to manage the development process. You have your product backlog chock full of features, your sprint goals are set, and you're diligently following the Scrum events. Now imagine that during a sprint review, you demo a new feature and the stakeholders absolutely hate it.
Ouch. That's gotta sting.
It happens, but here's where empiricism comes in. Instead of getting defensive or trying to force the feature through, a Scrum team embraces the feedback. They acknowledge that their initial assumptions about the feature were wrong.
So they don't just shrug off the feedback and say, well, too bad it's already built.
Not at all. Remember those core Scrum values: openness, respect, courage? They come into play here. The team is open to hearing the feedback, respects the stakeholders' opinions, and has the courage to admit they got it wrong.
Okay, I can see how those values are crucial. So the team acknowledges the feedback, then what?
Then they adapt. They might decide to scrap the feature entirely, go back to the drawing board, or come up with a completely new solution. And here's the key: they don't see this as a failure, they see it as a learning opportunity.
It's like that famous saying, fail fast and fail often. But in this case, it's more like learn fast and adapt even faster.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of Scrum. It provides a framework for embracing change and uncertainty, which is essential in today's fast-paced world. It's about acknowledging that we don't have all the answers up front and being willing to course correct along the way based on what we learn.
This has been eye-opening. So for anyone listening who's feeling stuck in the mud with their current project management style, it sounds like the Scrum Guide might be just the thing to shake things up.
I wholeheartedly agree. Whether you're building software, launching a marketing campaign, or even just trying to organize your own life, the principles of Scrum can be incredibly valuable.
So much more than just a set of rules. It's a philosophy, a way of thinking, a guidebook for navigating complexity and delivering exceptional results.
Well said. And remember, you don't need to become a Scrum Master overnight. Start by understanding the core principles outlined in the Scrum Guide. Experiment with the framework and see what works for you.
You just might be surprised at the positive impact it can have on your work and your team. Well, that's it for today's deep dive into the world of Scrum. Until next time, remember, embrace change, stay adaptable, and keep those sprints moving forward. So the sprint backlog is like a smaller, more focused version of the product backlog, containing only the tasks the team is committed to tackling within that specific sprint.
You've got it. It's their game plan for the sprint, breaking down those bigger product backlog items into bite-sized tasks they can actually achieve within the time box. And here's where it gets really interesting. The sprint backlog isn't set in stone.
Wait, what? I thought we were supposed to stick to the plan.
You're right, you don't want to be changing course every 5 minutes. But the Scrum Guide emphasizes that the sprint backlog is a living artifact. If the developers realize they need to add or remove tasks to achieve the sprint goal, they have the autonomy to do that.
So it's about finding that balance between commitment and flexibility, sticking to the sprint goal, but adapting the plan as needed.
Exactly. And to make sure everyone is on the same page about what done actually means, we have the definition of done.
Okay, this sounds important. Tell me more.
Have you ever been in a situation where you thought something was finished, but then someone else on the team had a completely different definition of finished?
Oh, absolutely. We've all been there. It's like trying to speak different languages.
That's exactly what the definition of done prevents. It's a shared understanding within the Scrum team of what criteria a piece of work needs to meet before it can be considered done.
So no more almost done or done but ambiguity.
Exactly. The definition of done brings clarity and ensures a consistent quality standard across the board.
Okay, I'm convinced. Clear expectations for the win. So we've covered the Scrum events, the artifacts that bring transparency, and the all-important values that underpin it all. But something you said earlier has been sticking with me, that whole empiricism thing. How does that philosophy actually play out in the real world of Scrum?
Ah, you're picking up on the good stuff.
Yeah.
It's one thing to understand the individual elements of Scrum, but to really grasp its power, you need to see how it all comes together under this umbrella of empiricism.
All right, break it down for me. Give me a real-world scenario.
Let's say your Scrum team is building a mobile app, and you're using Scrum to manage the development process. You have your product backlog chock full of features, your sprint goals are set, and you're diligently following the Scrum events. Now, imagine that during a sprint review, you demo a new feature and the stakeholders absolutely hate it.
Ouch, that's got to sting.
It happens. But here's where empiricism comes in. Instead of getting defensive or trying to force the feature through, a Scrum team embraces the feedback. They acknowledge that their initial assumptions about the feature were wrong.
So they don't just shrug off the feedback and say, well, too bad, it's already built.
Not at all. Remember those core Scrum values: openness, respect, courage. They come into play here. The team is open to hearing the feedback, respects the stakeholders' opinions, and has the courage to admit they got it wrong.
Okay, I can see how those values are crucial. So the team acknowledges the feedback, then what?
Then they adapt. They might decide to scrap the feature entirely, go back to the drawing board, or come up with a completely new solution. And here's the key: they don't see this as a failure. They see it as a learning opportunity.
It's like that famous saying, fail fast and fail often. But in this case, it's more like learn fast and adapt even faster.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of Scrum. It provides a framework for embracing change and uncertainty, which is essential in today's fast-paced world. It's about acknowledging that we don't have all the answers up front and being willing to course correct along the way based on what we learn.
This has been eye-opening. So for anyone listening who's feeling stuck in the mud with their current project management style, it sounds like the Scrum Guide might be just the thing to shake things up.
I wholeheartedly agree. Whether you're building software, launching a marketing campaign, or even just trying to organize your own life, the principles of Scrum can be incredibly valuable.
So much more than just a set of rules. It's a philosophy, a way of thinking, a guidebook for navigating complexity and delivering exceptional results.
Well said. And remember, you don't need to become a Scrum Master overnight. Start by understanding the core principles outlined in the Scrum Guide, experiment with the framework, and see what works for you.
You just might be surprised at the positive impact it can have on your work and your team. Well, that's it for today's deep dive into the world of Scrum. Until next time, remember, embrace change, stay adaptable, and keep those sprints moving forward.